Hey there, YouTube. How are you this evening? I'm going to do some quick pulls here. I've got Caius's Burst. I got all the stuff on these banners except for the FR. As far as whether or not you should be pulling, man, if only I'd gotten that lucky the first time. Sid, and it's not so much a should you pull as when you're pulling on this banner, things to be aware of. Sid doesn't get any kind of a rework, just force levels. Caius gets a minor rework. Short version is his skills hit a little bit harder, but not much. They're still kind of weak. However, his EX and LD they do a lot of damage now. I believe his EX is like 5 AoE HP attacks plus AoE delay plus launch. And it's also got a recast up. My ticket situation's kind of dire. I am unironically using gems here for the Fujin FR. As for Fujin, she does get an FR here. She also gets a rework. Short version, again, both of her skills will now... All of her buttons, her base skills, I should say. Her base skills and her EX all have a launch attached to them now, which is pretty sweet, especially for since skill 1 is AoE and skill 2 has splash, so you're going to set up the other guy for launch as well, which is pretty neat. Good players get the weapon. As for her LD, the important part of that is that the buff gets tweaked a little bit. So now that it doesn't matter which member of your party triggers it, it will battery the entire party. The battery amount is increased, and this is more of a tech thing than anything else. The way it's worded, you get the battery regardless of whether or not it's wind weakness damage or something else. So for example, if you are doing damage with a character who, let's say they're elemental or something like that, and Fujin can't enchant them, they'll still battery the party off of that. If it's a character that deals damage via, they have this particular debuff up, so I deal weakness damage, you'll get that off of Fujin as well, which is pretty nice. Her EX hits a lot harder. It's, I think, 5 HP attacks, full AoE with AoE delay plus launch plus battery. It's really good. And her trap attack that she had, that would basically just be used to cut enemies brave after the end of their turns, and now guarantees a launch one time. Basically, the next turn that you get, you're going to launch them. And it also has 3 HP attacks attached to it. So the short version is that Fujin's base kit is actually really good now. I wouldn't call it stellar, but it's pretty solid. Especially if you're trying to run like some kind of off-turn FR condition. If you think about it, she could trigger Canes, and she launches a bunch. Know what I'm saying? You have Fujin drive a Kane FR with Kane and like Freya in the air. You let the enemies get some turns, boom, you're in. Her FR conditions, though, are dealing wind damage on turn, which obviously with Fujin in the party, being an enchanter, it's always going to happen. Whereas the second part is whenever Fujin launches an enemy, which makes it kind of terrible. I would argue that this is probably the second worst FR in the game. It is for sure bottom 3. I would argue that it is somewhat better than Desh's, but not by much. If we're looking at these are terrible Olympics, this is like a silver 0.5 medal, and Desh is the gold, you know what I mean? So, I can't really recommend pulling the FR. I'm doing it because I like Fujin. Final Fantasy VIII, waifu, faves, etc. I always pull for Fujin. And on JP, I didn't actually max this out, so I'm going to do that here. I don't have the mats for her armor, though. But I can get them. No! Do this. Anyways, I think Fujin's really cool, so I always pull. Whereas Raijin has never been cool, so I don't like pulling for Raijin. Look at that. After inflicting knockback. Man, if only it worked normally. If it was just you get the plus 40% when you're doing a launch for any character, oh man, that would be so good. She would be a fantastic FR in that case. As for things that they can do, Fujin has a lot of party battery. She does not buff party members. No, I take that back. She has a speed buff for the party that she applies to them each individually. She has primarily AoE attacks. She does have one that's single target. It's all ranged. It's all elemental. She can do damage at the end of enemy turns that isn't a counter, which can be noteworthy. And come to think of it, she doesn't do melee damage, but you could trigger Dorgan's FR, which I want to say is wind damage, and it likes you doing damage off turn, but also she would be able to break them potentially, and trigger his follow-up attack, which will definitely work with his FR. And I believe Aranea's also wants you to do delays, as well as breaking enemies or attacking broken enemies. And Aranea's does function with off turns, like off turn breaks. So your Caius Doom debuff will do that, as well as something like Fujin's trap attack. As for Caius, I believe he's all melee, but he's got launch. I think his EX has battery on it. He's got break, but it's primarily... He has off-turn break with his buffs, or debuffs, excuse me. And his burst effect has on-turn breaks, just for him. So you can pair Caius with Gabranth. And if Caius's burst effect is up, his BT effect breaks will trigger Gabranth's FR condition. So he can drive Gabranth's FR, essentially. Sorry, I had to take a drink. My throat was super dry there. I don't think either of these characters are absolutely amazing or anything like that, but I think that they can be fun. I've already blued Caius. Did I green him in preparation for this? Yes, I did. So, my plan... I want to try Caius out with Gabranth, because I think that'll be really cool. It'll be fun. So, yeah. Drop a comment. Let me know what you think. I really need to remember to start doing that at the beginning of videos. Thank you for watching, though. I do appreciate it. If you're pulling, good luck. Godspeed. I think, as well, last thing. If you don't have the LDs for these characters, you should absolutely pull. Sid is eventually going to be an actually really good character. And his EX has 13 HP attacks attached to it, which, to the best of my knowledge, is the highest count of any character in the game. Possible exception, I think BT Tifa is 13 on her LD. So maybe Sid Reigns with his burst effect up, because his follow-up is 9, plus the 2 from the launch is 13, so, or 11, excuse me, plus whatever he does with the skill. So this is really good. Sid is a solid character. His skills are outdated, but his EX will annihilate things in force time if you really bump up the gauge a lot. Fujin has Wind Enchant on base and LD calls. You absolutely want to make sure you have that, especially if you're a Sabin fan. We've seen now in JP where we're starting to get characters. We've gotten, I think, 2 so far, and we're about to get a 3rd one in the form of Rubicante, where Lulu's LD call is really, really good for that fire enchant. So be sure to pick this up. This is, you need this. Maybe not need, but you want this. Because it's one of the only sources of party wind enchant in the game, I believe. I believe Bartz's is on his base call, but it's for that character only, I think. And then Caius, his LD hits really hard. You're not missing out too terribly much on the debuffs outside of niche debuff application for things like Tier 10, which is coming up next week. Anyways, good luck, good night, and be good. Take care.